With these 4 strategies, anyone can become indistractable. All human behavior is driven by a desire to escape discomfort. The difference between traction and distraction is one word, and that one word is intent. Because the whole goal of this thing, the big picture, is to live a life without regret.
All human behavior is about the avoidance of discomfort. And today, we're going to meet someone who can help us tap in to how we can further explore discomfort, but efficiently, effectively, and indistractably. This individual is a high performer in his own right, a best-selling author, a keynote speaker, an investigator of the truth, if I may. I'm so pleased to welcome who I'd like to call a new friend, Mr. Nir Eyal. How are you today, sir?
Great to see you, Jonathan. Certainly a friend, and it's an honor to be with you today. Thank you.
I think an opportune place to start would probably be with what I mentioned at the top about human behavior being rooted in the avoidance of discomfort. I think getting to the root cause probably at the outset, setting the tone for everyone is important. How do you feel about that statement?
Well, I'm so glad you picked up on that. I mean, I've said a lot of things for many, many years. And so the fact that you picked up on what I think is one of the most important lessons I've learned in my research, which is that all human behavior is driven by a desire to escape discomfort. And that really goes against what most people have been taught, what most people believe. They believe in this metaphor of carrots and sticks, that everything we do is about the pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain. Jeremy Bentham said this. Sigmund Freud said something similar. But it turns out we now know, neurologically speaking, that that is not true. Everything we do is about just one thing, and that is the desire to escape discomfort. And so for me, it was kind of like a moment in The Matrix. Remember in the movie, there's that part where Neo goes to that room with to visit the Oracle, and there's like that boy with the spoon, and the spoon starts bending, and he's kind of freaked out, and the boy says, "Imagine there is no spoon." Right? And then he realizes he's in the Matrix. Right? There's something similar that happened to me when I realized this fact that the carrot is the stick, meaning that even the pursuit of pleasure, even the desire to feel good, wanting, craving, lusting, hunger, all of those things are themselves, those emotions are psychologically destabilizing. So the way the brain gets us to act is not based on what feels good, it's about the memory of what felt good. And so everything you do, even the pursuit of pleasurable sensations, is spurred by discomfort. So to me, that's not only is that fascinating because it kind of explains all human behavior, is incredibly empowering. Because now when I lack motivation, when I do something against my long-term interests, when I fall off track in terms of being the kind of person I want to be, I can look back and say, wait a minute, why did that happen? And you know what? It's almost always because of a feeling. It's just a feeling, right? It's just that I was unable in the moment to control my reaction to discomfort, to an emotion. That's it. That's really it. Now, this is a very Buddhist mentality, right? That pain is obligatory, but suffering is optional. It's really, I think it's helped me in many ways, particularly when it comes to my research around distraction, about how people say, oh, the world today is so crazy and I can't get off my phone and my boss wants this and my kids want that. And you see what happened on Twitter and the election and all this stuff that's going on in the world. Is take a step back and say, wait a minute, what's going on here? What's really happening here? Is it objective facts that are driving you to live the life that you're leading right now? Or is it your interpretation of your perception of those facts? Right? It's just our feelings. And so to me, that was incredibly liberating because so many of our problems, it turns out, can be explained by this fact that everything we do is about a desire to escape discomfort, which therefore must mean that time management is pain management. Money management is pain management. Weight management. You're in the fitness industry, right? Weight management. It's just pain management. All of it is pain management.
Actually, legal industry, which is also pain management to a degree. Fitness is really
Legal?
where my heart is. There's so much that comes to mind. I mean, when we talk about pain management and the ability to stay with discomfort, I mean, you're someone who runs around the streets of New York quite literally barefoot.
Wow, you did some research. I love it.
Come on. So I'm gonna respect your time. I'm gonna make sure that it's worth it.
So that's actually part of it. I mean, it's I don't talk about it very much.
We're not, by the way, we're not talking about barefoot shoes. We're talking about straight up barefoot, like no socks, no shoes. Okay. Well, how does that factor in? How does that actively doing something uncomfortable? I mean, in terms of a social norm, I don't know if that impacts your decision making at all because it's obviously completely out of the stratosphere. I train barefoot. I don't run on the streets barefoot, all due respect. My Achilles can't handle it. And I'm just curious, how does something like that factor into your ability to avoid or sit with discomfort, you running barefoot?
It sounds very superficial, but to me, I think there's a deeper meaning to it. There's a reason that most religions have an element of testing your capabilities. In Judaism, we take one day on Yom Kippur and we don't eat for the entire day. We fast, and we're supposed to suffer during that fast. Like you're not supposed to like watch TV all day. You're supposed to contemplate the hunger and that it feels uncomfortable. It's intentional. The Muslims have Ramadan. There's all kinds of tests of endurance that come with many world religions. And of course, historically, you can see all kinds of examples of people doing amazing things, amazing tests of strength. And to me, I've always really admired that and been inspired by that. One of my favorite influencers is David Goggins. I think I don't want to be David Goggins, but I'm very inspired by this guy who's got nothing to sell you, right? Other than his books. He doesn't sell, olive oil and supplements and anything. He just does these things because he wants to prove to the world that we're capable of so much more than we think we are. That's a very powerful lesson, that we are severely limited by our own perception, our beliefs about what's possible. We call this the nocebo effect. Like you have the placebo, right? The placebo is an inert substance that provides some kind of relief from discomfort. Well, a nocebo is an inert substance that causes discomfort, that causes limitations. And so I think we are taking placebos every single day. And we're taking nocebos every single day, right? By saying, "Oh, I can't do this, I can't do that. I'm this type of person. I'm that type of person. I'm incapable." And so I like to do things that are a little bit weird, right? Like I like to test myself in certain ways to make sure that I'm not imposing these limiting beliefs. And so I kind of feel like if I can test it in one area of my life, then it's a great reminder in other areas of my life. So, I've been barefoot running. Again, it's a superficial example, whatever, barefoot running, big deal. But the fact that it's a little bit crazy and that I get weird looks and that most people think that's impossible for me is actually motivating for me. Because if I can do something that other people think is impossible in one area of my life, maybe I can do things that other people think are impossible in other areas of my life. So when it comes to something actually hard, right? Barefoot running right now is not actually that hard for me. But when it comes to writing, which is actually really hard, then I remember, oh yeah, okay, this is what it feels like to get better at something. This is what's required, right? Pushing through that discomfort, doing something that other people think is impossible. That's what makes this valuable. That's what makes this a contribution to others. So yeah, I think there are many reasons I think it enhances my life. I also like the fact that doing something a little bit counterintuitive, counterculture, and a little bit contrarian is a wonderful reminder of the need to be intellectually independent. Now, that's my small way, and I don't preach it to anyone else. Like, honestly, the reason I run barefoot is because shoes, when I ran with shoes, I used to be a heel striker. And so every time I ran with those big cushion shoes, I would hit with my heel first, with the Nike Airs or whatever. It would cause shin splints. It would cause knee pain. And then I read a wonderful book 15 years ago called Born to Run that talked about these Tarahumara Indians who run barefoot for, sometimes hundreds of miles over days. And they've got nothing but like a tiny little strip of leather with no cushion whatsoever. And then that led me into the physiology, I should say, of the foot and how the foot comes with its own cushion absorber and how if you run barefoot, it makes you run correctly. And so I tried it. And at first it was very painful. I hated it. It was impossible. But then the more I did it, a few steps. Now, okay, maybe like 5 minutes of barefoot walking. And now, okay, maybe 2 minutes of barefoot running. And then it showed me how I had this capability that I thought was impossible that I just bought hook, line, and sinker. You see these television commercial for Nike and you said, just do it. Well, that must be the way we've always done it. No, like athletic shoes are like, what, 70 years old, 60 years old? It's a brand new invention. And yet humans have been running barefoot for 200,000 years. But most of us have completely forgotten how to do it. And that's the tip of the iceberg. There's all kinds of other things that now technology has made so easy, so comfortable, and so convenient that we don't even try. I'm going down a bit of a rabbit hole here. But if you think about what the ancient Greeks could do that we've forgotten, right? The ancient Greeks, Socrates talked about how this terrible technology of the written word was awful. And in many ways, he was right. Because what he was afraid of, Socrates was afraid that when people started writing things down, they wouldn't bother to memorize them. And he's absolutely right. The ancient Greeks used to memorize volumes, volumes of information, and they would keep them all in their head. They would keep them in their head through song and through memory palaces, all kinds of techniques they used to memorize stuff, which you and I can't do today. But if you had been trained from a very early age to do something that today seems impossible, to memorize, volumes and volumes of information, you'd be able to do it. But you don't do it because we have this amazing technology of the written word. So you say, okay, I'll get to it when I need it. Of course, now we've got Google in our pockets, so we really don't have to memorize very much. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. I think there's all kinds of these skills that some people used to have, or some people still do have somewhere on earth. And it's kind of cool to explore. Wait a minute, what am I really capable of if I were to try?
I wish I had the same experience barefoot running. My body just didn't take to it the same way. I developed this crazy Achilles tendonitis that it just couldn't keep up. And are you familiar with Ross Edgley?
No.
I feel like you would love this guy's journey. He's just this crazy scholar athlete who combines the principles of stoicism with physical feats. And he does crazy things like swim around Great Britain.
Oh, I have heard about this guy. I think I have heard about this guy. Yeah, I need to write down.
He's like the original barefoot runner influencer, I feel like, besides the Indians, naturally. Tomahawk Indians, I think you said? Tahomara, sorry. And part of what I really related to about your response just now is how the hard things that you go through in outlining your experience of running through the streets and having people stare at you, that's actually curated into experience of doing the hard thing, not the physical exertion, but mentally too. People are going to look at you differently for doing something like that. Another example, I was in Dallas a couple of weeks ago. There was a man running barefoot juggling 3 actual bowling clubs. I think I was the only person who thought that was the coolest thing ever. Everyone's like, what a weirdo. I'm like, bro, if I could do that,
that's
I would
amazing.
do that. He's working so many different muscles.
Yeah.
The next kind of area that I want to explore with you is how you talk about attention in a very unique way, one that I personally have never heard of. And attention for me, I'm someone who dealt with diagnoses of ADD, ADHD, learning specialists, and, couldn't sit down and read a book, do an assignment. And I reflect on that experience often as disinterest, unmotivated, undisciplined, a whole bunch of different things, right? And, I read your book, Indistractable. I have it right here, and I have notes. And at the top of it, I set the intention. Our mutual friend, Nick Hutchinson, he gave me this idea when I interviewed him, but also in other conversations, to set an intention at the top of every book that you read. And for me, my intention was to find 1 or 2 meaningful strategies that would help me be less distracted from tasks that I need to focus on and prepare, and also a fantastic set of questions for you. When I think about indistractability, if you will, and I read your book, which I believe you also have another book that you wrote called Hooked. When it comes to attention hacking and the common misconceptions around it, how we've been led down this road to think that it's about, what we're motivated by, or just social media, all these external triggers. You've kind of inverted the actual premise around it, around understanding your internal triggers and also reeling yourself back in. Can you, just for the audience, help them understand how they can master their internal triggers and how they can reel themselves back in?
Let me back up and start with kind of this framework that can help us all understand what distraction is really about so that we can overcome it. So, the best place to start is to understand the word distraction, what that word really means. And the best way to understand what that word means is to ask yourself, what is the opposite of that term? What's the antonym? So, the antonym of distraction, most people will say the opposite of distraction is focus, but that's not exactly right. The opposite of distraction is not focus. The opposite of distraction, if you look at the etymology of the word, is traction. Okay, of course it is. If you look at them side by side, right, it was kind of an aha moment for me. You've got traction and distraction. They're clearly opposites. Now, they both come from the same Latin root, trahare, which means to pull, and they both end in the same 6 letters, A-C-T-I-O-N, which spells action, reminding us that distraction is an action that we ourselves take. It's not something that happened to you. Okay, it's not, oh, my phone distracted me, my kids distracted me. It was an action that I myself took. So traction is any action that pulls you towards what you said you were going to do, things you do with intent, things that move you closer to your values and help you become the kind of person you want to become. Those are acts of traction. The opposite of those acts of traction are acts of distraction. Distraction is any action that pulls you away from what you plan to do, further away from your goals, further away from your values, further away from becoming the person you want to become. So this is really, really important because I would argue the difference between traction and distraction is one word. And that one word is intent. That, as Dorothy Parker said, the time you plan to waste is not wasted time. So I think we need to stop moralizing and medicalizing and blaming and shaming social media and technology and all this stuff. Rather, if you want to do that stuff, it's fine. If you want to watch Netflix, if you want to play a video game, if you want to go on social media, do it. Enjoy it. Don't feel guilty about it. But do it on your schedule and according to your values, not someone else's, certainly not a tech company or media company. Okay, so that's traction. So do it if you planned for it. Conversely, just because something is a work-related task doesn't mean it's not a distraction, right? So for me, I would sit down at my desk at work first thing in the morning and say, okay, now I'm going to focus on my task. I'm not going to get distracted. Here I go. I'm going to get started on that big project I've been delaying. I'm not going to procrastinate. I'm ready to go. But first, let me check some email, right? And I would justify it to myself saying, well, it's email. I got to do it at some point today, right? It's a work-related task. I'm being productive. But what I didn't realize is if that's not what I said I was going to do in advance, it's just as much of a distraction as going on social media or playing video games. So traction is any action that you plan to do in advance, no matter what that is, being with your kids, prayer, meditation, playing video games, doesn't matter. If it's what you said you're going to do in advance, it's traction. Anything else is distraction for all areas of your life, with your family, with your kids, with your work, with yourself, whatever. Traction versus distraction. Very, very important dichotomy. Now, what prompts us to take these actions? Okay, what comes before the action is a trigger. Now, there are 2 kinds of triggers. We have what we call external triggers. These are the usual suspects. The pings, the dings, the rings, all of these things in our outside environment. This is what people tend to blame when they say they got distracted. It's my phone, it's my kids, my boss, whatever. That's the stuff outside of us. But would you believe studies find that they only account for 10% of our distractions? Only 10% of the time that you check your phone, studies have confirmed this, is it because of a ping, ding, or ring. 10%. So what's the other 90%? Turns out that 90% of the time that we get distracted, it's not because of the stuff happening outside of us. It's about what's happening inside of us, particularly what's happening inside our own heads. These are called internal triggers. And so this gets back to what we were saying earlier. It's about the desire to escape discomfort. That distraction, this is super important. Distraction is not a moral failing. It's not a character flaw. I hate to say this because I'm going to get some haters out there. It's probably not about ADHD either. What's really going on is that there's some kind of uncomfortable emotion that you don't know how to deal with, that you haven't practiced having a state of mind that allows you to deal with that discomfort in a healthy way that propels you towards traction rather than distraction. Now, let me just say, I'm not saying ADHD isn't real. ADHD is real, but it's way overdiagnosed. Way overdiagnosed, especially with adults. Today, I hate to say it, almost anybody can get an ADHD diagnosis in about 30 minutes with an app. It's way, way overdiagnosed. And you say, oh, what's the big deal, right? Like better living through chemistry. Number one, these medications have some severe side effects that we really, really need to be careful of. suicidality, sexual dysfunction, all kinds of things that these medications can cause problems with. More importantly, it's this stupid label. When people are told you have a dysfunction, you have a disease, you have a disorder that also has no cure, you're going to have it forever. It's who you are. Some people find that very comforting, and I understand why, right? Like, it would be great to say, oh, all this trouble I've been having all these years, it's not my fault. It's my brain. It's my broken brain. And I understand why that's very comforting. And that could be helpful for a short period of time. But for God's sakes, if you can possibly, unless you've got a really severe diagnosis, which some people really do have a very, very severe chronic case, those people are properly diagnosed. But far too many people, they don't have the severe disorder. And instead of learning how to beat this problem, they just take pills. But here's the problem. Pills don't teach skills. So the first line of defense, okay, I'm not anti-medication. I'm not anti-ADHD, certainly. The first line of defense has to be learn the skills. Okay, why not? It's a non-pharmaceutical intervention. And so anybody, whether you have ADHD or not, doesn't matter. We need to learn how to become indistractable. And then, as if okay, that's not enough, we need some heavier artillery. All right, now let's go for some medication. As opposed to, I think what happens far too often, particularly with kids, particularly with boys, is that before we teach them any skills, before we even try, oh no, that won't work for my kid, right? Back to these beliefs, these labels, right? Let's stuff them full of pills and medication, as opposed to saying, okay, can we do some simple things? Can we first and foremost learn what we will do with that discomfort, right? How many of us have a plan in place to say, what do I do when I get bored? What do I do? I don't have to listen to everything I think. I don't have to believe everything I say in my head. I don't have to react to every emotion. Who says I need to react every time I'm bored? So be bored. So what's going to happen? Is your head going to fall off if you feel bored? No. It's about learning. Again, back to learning discomfort, running barefoot, right? Okay, it hurts a little bit. So you're going to die? No, you're not going to die. Your body's going to heal and grow from it and get stronger. So be bored. What's wrong with that? Be a little fidgety. What's wrong with that? Nothing. This is how we get stronger. I mean, look at you. You got those big, bold arms. How did you get those strong arms? Did you sit there and say, this hurts, I don't want to exercise? No, you intentionally cause stress to your muscles so that they adapt and grow. And that's what we need to do for our brains. That's what we need to do with this skill of managing our attention. So now that we have that compass of, okay, we've got traction, we've got distraction, we've got internal triggers, we've got external triggers. Now we've got these 4 strategies to become indistractable. Step number 1, master internal triggers. Have a plan in place for what you will do with discomfort. So whether it's boredom, loneliness, fatigue, anxiety, uncertainty, doesn't matter. A plan in place for what you will do when you feel discomfort. Are you going to try and escape it? Oh, I can't deal with this, right? I can't deal with uncertainty. I can't deal with a lack of control. I can't deal with boredom. I can't deal with loneliness. Let me take a drink. Let me smoke a cigarette. Let me scroll a feed. Let me watch TV. Let me do something to take my mind off the problem. That's what distractible people do. Versus indistractable people say, okay, it's an emotion. I have tools to deal with these emotions so they don't get the best of me. Step number 2, making time for traction. We talked about traction as any action that leads you towards what you said you were going to do. How many of us keep a goddamn calendar? If you don't know what is traction, you have no right to say you got distracted, because you can't say something distracted you unless you know what it distracted you from. I'm going to say this again. You can't say you got distracted unless you know what you got distracted from. So if you have white space on your calendar, what the hell did you get distracted from? You didn't plan anything. And I don't care if you have ADHD or not. You can plan. You can say, this is my time to watch TV. This is my time to go on social media. And this is my time to be with my family. This is my time to read a book, right? If you don't do that, no shit, you got distracted, right? Because we didn't plan anything. So if you don't understand what is traction, you can't say you got distracted. You have to plan your day. Everyone can do this. The third step, hacking back external triggers. Right. So this is where we talk about, okay, the pings, the dings, the rings, that's kindergarten stuff. We can adjust our phone settings. We can adjust our computer. There's 1 page for that in my book. The harder stuff is, what about the emails that didn't need to be sent or received? What about the stupid meetings that we didn't need to attend? Our kids, we love our kids, but they can be a huge source of distraction. So we need to tick through each and every one of those. How can we hack back those external triggers? And then the final step is to prevent distraction with pacts. A pact is a pre-commitment. This is when we say in advance what we will do when distraction rears its ugly head. How will we build that firewall, that last line of defense against distraction? So now we have our 4 steps, okay, our 4 strategies. Master internal triggers, make time for traction, hack back external triggers, and prevent distraction with pacts. With these 4 strategies, anyone can become indistractable.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Inside the Inspired. My name is Jonathan Cohen, and I have a quick favor to ask you. If you're getting any value out of this content, please take a second to subscribe to the channel. You help us reach more people, and you can also stay up to date with all the latest content coming your way. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll catch you in the episode. I think the main thing is, like, independent of the overdiagnoses of ADHD, when you talked about the feeling aspect, that was so enlightening. And I'm sure so many people right now in the audience are feeling that also, where it's just an honest conversation with yourself about, I just don't really want to deal with this particular emotion. Therefore, I'm going to pick up the drink, pick up the cigarette, pick up the snack and binge watch it, turn on the TV. And rather than sit with the emotion and observe it or like deal with the task at hand. And you also outlined it in the form of not knowing how to deal with it as not just being uncomfortable, but truly not knowing how to deal with that particular emotion, that confusion around it. And then it surfaces in a distracted behavior. That was very powerful because I'm thinking about all the times that I've dealt with situations like that.
We find what's interesting is that when we look at high performers in every field, whether it's athletics, whether it's business, whether it's the arts, you find that there's this common trait with high performers that they feel the same way the rest of us do. They also get bored. They also get lonely. They also get uncertain. The difference is that high performers have learned how to deal with that discomfort, and they use it as rocket fuel to propel them towards traction, rather than what most people do is to try and escape it with distraction. Let me scroll it away. Let me drink it away. Let me click it away. As opposed to what high performers do, they say, okay, that feeling, hell yeah, I'm going to lean into that feeling. I want more of that discomfort because that says I'm doing it right. What's interesting is that people will have that. They'll know exactly what I'm talking about in one area of their life, and yet they can't transfer it over to another area, right? So sometimes I work with people who say, I'm so distractible and I can't get things done, and I've got all this stuff going on in my life. And yet, they'll be like you. They're just reminded, looking at you, you're obviously very fit. They'll be like, and I'll say to them, like, okay, what happens in the gym, right? What happens when you feel the stress of working out? Do you escape it? Right? The first time you're starting to get a little tired and out of breath and your muscles start aching, do you run away? No, hell no, right? That means I'm doing it right. I'm excited. I'm jazzed up by the fact that I feel uncomfortable. That means I'm doing it right. I'm growing. I'm getting better. That's what I'm here for. And yet they don't transfer that into, wait a minute, when I'm in a relationship that's uncomfortable or I'm doing work that's uncomfortable, right? Oh, now I can't deal with it. I got to go. But it's exact same principle.
So when I weight train in particular, strength train, run, whatever it is, largely with weights, I find this, or calisthenics, control is the main premise of and theme of my training. I'm not throwing, I even just posted something about it today. I'm not just throwing the weight around. I'm genuinely trying to develop a mind-muscle connection to understand where in my body I'm supposed to feel the movement to stimulate change, growth. And there's one powerful sentiment that resonates with me so deeply that I read in The Body Keeps the Score about how the more body awareness you develop, the more mental awareness you developed as a byproduct, specifically when it comes to the core. And that hit on so many levels because you just learn more about yourself as you get stronger. You understand kinesthetic awareness, the way your body moves through space. And so one of the things that you talk about is about turning values, mastering, I want to make sure I say it right, turning values into time, and how we're quick to guard our property, but not our time, our most precious asset. How can people start to identify their values in a way that helps them master their time?
Yeah, absolutely. So I love the metaphor that you brought up there. Just to finish that point, I think it's very, very apt around how bringing awareness to your body is very helpful when it comes to building strength, and bringing awareness to your emotions is a very helpful way to bring awareness, to bring growth to your psychological well-being. So the first step to becoming indistractable is to notice those sensations, right? That many people, when they get distracted, They don't realize what was the preceding emotion. So bringing that awareness to what was your mental state? Okay, you were trying to do X, and yet you got distracted from doing that task. What was the preceding emotion? Again, 90% of the time, it's a feeling. It's not something outside of us. It's inside of us. So what were you trying to escape, right? If you sit down with your family for dinner and you can't help but check your phone every 5 minutes, it ain't the phone. That's not the problem. The problem is something is going on in your head that you can't deal with any other way at the moment. So you need to learn a new skill, right? A new practice of, okay, when I feel this way, what else could I do? The second point of, okay, step number 2, making time for traction. How do we do that? How do we plan our day so that we can live up to our values? Now, that's the big picture here. Why are we having this conversation? If your life is hunky-dory and you're living the best life you could possibly live, this is probably the wrong podcast episode for you. But if you know you're capable of more, as so many of us are, right? You know what to do. You know basically how to lose weight. You know basically how to be more productive at work. You know basically how to have better relationships. And frankly, if you don't know, Google it, right? All this stuff is available for free. The problem is not that we don't know what to do. It's that we don't know how to get out of our own way. So if that's you, and it certainly was me, that's why I wrote this book, right? Research is me search. I wrote this book for me more than anyone else because I kept getting distracted. It took me 5 years to write this book because until I learned these techniques, I was constantly distractible. So it wasn't until I did all this research that I learned how to become indestructible myself. So the idea here is that in order to know what is traction, in order to know what is distraction, you have to know what is traction. You have to decide what are you going to do with your time. Now, to do that, you have to turn your values into time. You have to turn your values into time. Because the whole goal of this thing, the big picture, is to live a life without regret. That's why I wrote this book. That's my mission in life, is to help people live without regret so that you don't look back and say, how did I spend my day, right? My week, my month, my year, my lifetime. I don't want to look back and say, ugh, why didn't I start that business? Why didn't I write that book? Why didn't I have a better relationship with my family? Why didn't I take better care of my body? I don't want to look back and regret. And so that's what I don't want others to experience either. So I want people to do whatever it is that they want to do. If what you want to do is play video games all day, do it. I'm not going to tell you that's not what you should do. It's your life. You can do whatever you want. But I want to help you do whatever it is you say you want to do with your time and attention. So with that limited time you have on earth, we have to start with our values. What are values? Values are attributes of the person you want to become. Values are attributes of the person you want to become. So you have to ask yourself, how would the person I want to become spend their time? And so I give people this framework to say, okay, in order to fill out your calendar, this is very difficult for people to say, like, what are my values? How do I fill out my calendar? This is exactly how you do it, step by step. Step number 1 is to ask yourself, how would the person you want to become spend their time according to these 3 life domains? So you take out your calendar for the week ahead. Okay, right now it's probably blank. Maybe you've got a dentist appointment or something. But for that calendar, you ask yourself, for these 3 life domains, starting with you are at the center of these 3 life domains. How would the person you want to become spend time taking care of themselves? So whether that's time for reading, timing for meditation, prayer, exercise, a bedtime, right? We know these things are good for us. We know we want to do them, but we don't do them. Why don't we do them? Because we haven't planned for them. They're not on our calendar. We go to bed whenever we feel like it. We exercise whenever we feel like it. We pray or meditate whenever we feel like it. No, the people who are indistractable, the people who actually do these things, they have it on their calendar. It's scheduled. So by doing that, starting with you, how would the person you want to become take time to take care of themselves? If you can't take care of yourselves, you can't take care of other people. You can't make the world a better place. So plan that time first and foremost, okay? Then the next life domain is your relationships. Part of the reason we have a loneliness epidemic in our country is because people aren't planning time for the most important relationships, not just with their spouse or their kids, but also with the greater community. Right? Robert Putnam wrote about this in the 1990s in his book called Bowling Alone, about how we've seen this disintegration of community time, right? So the bowling league, the Kiwanis Club, the church group, having that time is absolutely critical, especially for men, right? Men tend to lose friends precipitously as they age. Make time in your schedule for your buddies. Have that time planned when you will have social interaction with others. It's incredibly important for your mental health and your physical well-being. Put it in your schedule. Don't just give your wife or your kids whatever scraps of time are left over. Put it in your calendar. Then finally, the last life domain is the work domain, which is where most people start, but I think it's actually where we should finish. It's about separating work into 2 kinds of work. we have what we call reactive work. Reactive work is the kind of work that is reacting to things, reacting to notifications, reacting to emails, reacting to taps on the shoulder from your boss. That's reactive work. Most people spend most of their day doing reactive work, right? Because that's easy. My email will tell me what to do, right? And so that's very easy. It's psychologically, I don't have to think for myself. Email will tell me what to do. Well, that's terrible, because if all you're doing all day is reactive work, you're running real fast in the wrong direction. A much better approach is to make sure you have some time in your day. It could be 20, 30, 45 minutes. You have to spend some time in your day doing what's called reflective work. What is reflective work? Strategizing, planning, thinking, for God's sakes, can only be done without distraction. So you've got to put in your calendar. Now, some jobs require much more reflective work, right? So if you're a programmer, you have to spend probably most of your day doing reflective work, the kind of work that can only be done without distraction. But all of us need at least some time in our day for that reflective work, and that has to be scheduled. So what you will get as a result of turning your values into time, you will invariably have more to do than you can get done. That's the point, because it's forcing you to make trade-offs, right? Because when you have a finite number of minutes in the day, you will force yourself to say, okay, what's more important? Is it more important that I spend time with my kids? Is it more important that I exercise? Is it more important that I spend more time in the office? Is it more important that I watch TV? It forces you to make those trade-offs, and that's good. Because as opposed to a to-do list, which is awful, to-do lists are terrible for your personal productivity. A to-do list has no constraints, right? You just add more and more and more and more crap to your to-do list, and most of it you never get done, and you feel like a loser because you look at all the stuff I didn't get done. Well, it's not that you're a loser, it's that this stupid technique of using a to-do list is broken. Rather, a time box calendar is when you say, okay, I've made these trade-offs, here's what I will do, here's what I will not do, and that's it. So I know what a perfect day looks like. I know what is traction. Everything else is distraction. And that feeling that you will get of, okay, this is a day well lived, according to my values, according to what I said I was going to do, which also includes fun, right? I don't want you to be an automaton all day. I want you to watch Netflix or play video games or whatever you want to do. You made your schedule. But whatever it is that you said you were going to do, that's now what we follow for the next day. So you can change that calendar tomorrow, the next day. You just can't change it within the day, because once you've set that calendar, that becomes traction for the day. Everything else is distraction.
There's a lot of conversation internally that's going on in everything that you've outlined. And that dialogue, that self-talk, there's a lot of push, pull, tension. What are my values? How do I want to spend my time? What if this doesn't work out? You mentioned the reflective element. And obviously, traction is a key takeaway from this conversation and all of your work. From a self-talk perspective, what is the effective tone? What is going to help people meaningfully make progress in intentionally designing their calendar, becoming indistractable, designing their dream life? I personally think it starts with how I talk to myself. I was being interviewed yesterday. Someone was asking me about self-talk, and this podcast is about self-talk. And when it comes to, for example, a workout, I'm not shaming myself into training. I used to, and the results weren't sustainable. A certain body fat percentage, a certain amount of work a certain weight that I could lift, etc. Now, obviously, it's more performance driven, and there's a shift. So for the audience, for you, and maybe yourself as an example, what's the role of self-talk in your life and in becoming indistractable?
Sure. Yeah. So this is super, super important. So when it comes to distraction or all of our behaviors, when it comes to something that we decide we want to do one thing and we do something else, most people fall into a few buckets when it comes to distraction. We either have what's called the blamer. The blamer is someone who blames things outside of themselves, right? It's my boss, it's my kids, it's social media, it's the world these days, it's the election, it's all this stuff. That's why I got distracted, right? Stuff outside of me. Those are the blamers. That doesn't help, because distraction has always been with us. We know that Plato, the Greek philosopher, talked about distraction 2,500 years ago. So if people were getting distracted 2,500 years before the internet, it can't be caused by our technology. There must be a deeper reason for this. And it's never going away. There will always be stuff outside of us that can lead towards distraction. So being a blamer doesn't work. The other category is a shamer. It sounds like that's what you are. That's what I used to be, certainly, is a shamer. A shamer says, oh, it's not the things outside of me. It is me. I'm the problem. I must be broken somehow. I need a diagnosis. I need a condition. There's something wrong about me that makes me act this way. Those are called shamers. The problem with that strategy is that when you feel shame, shame is a very uncomfortable internal trigger. And so the remedy, the escape from shame, which feels awful, is oftentimes, guess what? More distraction, right? So to take my mind off of the way I feel, I used to be clinically obese. And let me tell you, most of the time when I overate, I didn't overeat because I was hungry. I didn't overeat because food tasted delicious. I was eating my feelings. I was oftentimes ashamed about how much I had just eaten, and the solution to that discomfort was more eating. So we don't want to be blamers. We don't want to be shamers. We want to be what's called a claimer. Okay, not a blamer, not a shamer, but a claimer. A claimer claims responsibility not for how they feel. This is a really important point. You do not control your urges. You don't control your emotions. Most people don't know the difference between an emotion and a feeling. They use them interchangeably. Okay, an emotion is very different from a feeling. An emotion is a physiological reaction. A feeling is a psychological response. Meaning an urge, right? The urge to eat, the urge to smoke, the urge to click away on social media, the urge to do something, you don't control. That's a physiological response, okay? Now, what you do control is the feeling, is the reaction, is the response to that emotion. That becomes the feeling. It's the psychological interpretation of that emotion. But you don't control the urge. Let me give you an example. If you feel the urge to sneeze, you don't control it. Okay? If you feel the urge to sneeze, you can't not feel that urge. You already felt it. What you can control is what you will do in response to that urge, right? Hence the term responsibility. So a claimer claims responsibility for how they will respond to the urge. So what do you do when you feel the urge to sneeze? Do you sneeze all over everyone and get them sick? No, you take out a tissue and you cover your face because that's the responsible thing to do. And so it's the exact same thing when it comes to all of our emotions. It's about how we will respond to those emotions with feelings that serve us rather than hurt us.
Nir, this has been an awesome masterclass on how we can hack our attention, identify our values, and master our internal triggers. From the research, the way you articulated it, I know everyone is going to want to keep up with your journey. But before I ask that, there's one final question I'd like to pose to you that I pose to all my guests. If the future version of yourself from 10 years from now were to fly in and offer you some advice in order to get there, what do you think he would say to you?
I think it would be the same advice I would give myself from 10 years ago, which is one of my mantras: consistency over intensity. Pretty much everything worth having in life is on the other side of some kind of discomfort, right? You want to have an amazing relationship with your partner. That's not easy. Okay. I've been married for 23 years now. Relationships take work. It's not easy, right? We shouldn't expect them to be easy. It requires work. It requires consistent effort, not intensity, right? The way you win someone's heart is not by, hey, guess what? Let's have a fancy dinner tonight. Then you'll love me. No, it's about putting in the work day after day, being there for your partner. It's consistency. When it comes to, physical training, it's not, I'm going to make a New Year's resolution and I'm going to work out every day for 2 weeks. Right? That doesn't get you anywhere. What gets you somewhere, where you see physical change, where you get healthier, is consistently eating the right things, doing the right exercises day after day after day. Consistency over intensity. When it comes to a big project at work, right? You want to start a business, you want to write a book, you want to start a blog, whatever it is you want to do, it's about consistency. It's not, I'm going to work real hard for 24 hours. No, you got to work real hard for years. And so I would expect in 10 years to keep telling myself that mantra, that when I want to give up, when I want to get distracted, remember, consistency over intensity. Just keep putting in the work. Relentless forward progress.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Nir Eyal, please let everyone know where they can keep up with your journey.
Sure. So my blog is Nir and Far. Nir is spelled like my first name. So that's NIR and far.com. And my book is called Indistractable: How to Control Your Attention and Choose Your Life.
This was awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jonathan. Great to see you.